Hello everyone, and welcome yet again to an Anime Villainous how-to video. I'm Chaos in the Sky, and today I'll be showing you how to play as Father from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood in Anime Villainous. Father, also known as the Dwarf in the Flask, is a homunculus created by taking the essence of a being called the Eye and mixing it with the blood of Van Hohenheim, who at the time was a slave in the city of Xerxes. Following his creation, Father craved to gain more knowledge, unravel the secrets of the Eye through alchemy, and thus attain godhood. This led to Father sacrificing an entire nation's worth of people to gain immortality, along with a body similar to Hohenheim's, and then continue his ambitions for several centuries to come. He created more homunculus from himself to this end, seeking to craft a transmutation circle of enough magnitude to take control of the Eye he originally came from, and become all-powerful. To achieve complete knowledge along with the godhood he craves, Father must create a transmutation circle of incredible proportions. The way he does this in Anime Villainous is by placing a transmutation token on each of the 4 locations in his territory. But before we go in depth about how Father will be placing the transmutation tokens, let's talk about his villain ability first, as you'll be making a lot of use of it. Father's villain ability is that each time you discard a villain card, you may then shuffle it into your deck. What this means is that Father essentially gets to choose which cards go into his discard pile, and which cards remain in his deck to be drawn again. You need to be sure that you understand what is considered discarding a card for the purposes of Father's ability. It'll probably be a lot more than you realize. Anytime Father does something that would lead to a villain card going to the discard pile, he can instead shuffle it into his deck. This includes discarding a card by a discard action, using an ally in a vanquish action, and even just playing an effect card. Anytime Father does something that would have him put a card into the discard pile, his ability allows him to shuffle it into the deck instead. Because of this, you'll find that playing as Father requires you to work out what cards you want to see multiple times, and thus shuffle into your deck rather than discard them, as well as which cards you won't want back for a while. Always remember that Father's ability is a you may, not a requirement. If you don't want to see a card come back up in your deck, just don't use his ability, and let it go straight to the discard pile. Now that we've covered Father's villain ability, let's talk about actually achieving his objective. There's only one card Father has that can place transmutation tokens, which means you'll have to use it 4 total times to complete your objective. That card is Start a War, of which there are 3 copies in your villain deck. Start a War lets you place a transmutation token on a location that does not currently have one when you play it. However, getting a war underway is a very pricey endeavor, and so it costs an insane 10 power to play, making it the most expensive card in the Battle Begins box. Luckily for Father's wallet, the cost to play a Start a War is reduced by the total strength of all allies at the location he's trying to place a transmutation token at. Thanks to this, Father can lower the cost of Start a War from 10 all the way down to 0 and any number in between. It all depends on how his allies are set up. So let's go through all the allies in the deck, and after that I'll give you some examples for how they can be used in conjunction with Start a War for your objective. Father's main allies that will help you with your war-based conquest are of course the homunculus that he himself created. There are 7 homunculi, and they each have unique abilities to help Father. First up we have Greed, Sloth, and Gluttony, Father's 1-cost allies. Sloth is very straightforward. He has a strong 3 strength, but he cannot be moved from the location he's played to. Pretty good to guard a valuable location you expect a hero to end up at. Following Sloth we have Gluttony, whose ability is quite interesting. When Gluttony is discarded from your territory, you have the option to then play him to his previous location for free. This means you can use Gluttony in a vanquish action and then immediately replay him after doing so. Next we have Greed, who also has a strong 3 strength for his cheap cost of 1. His ability, however, is nothing but a negative, giving Father -2 strength. This makes it far harder for Father to utilize any sort of clashing, but Greed's strength for his low cost is typically worth it. Our next 2 homunculus are Lust and Envy, both of whom are 2 cost. Envy only has 2 strength, but if there are no other allies at his location, then Envy gets +2 strength, putting him up to 4. Very useful when a hero with 3 or 4 strength ends up at a location with no other allies around. While Envy prefers to be at a location on his own, Lust is the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Lust will let Father gain 1 power every time another ally is discarded from her location. Lust can be a pretty good way to gain some extra power when using your other allies in vanquishes and the like. Lastly, we have the 2 strongest homunculi, Pride and Wrath. They cost 3 power to play, but their high strength values of 4, along with their powerful abilities, make it clear why that is. Pride's ability makes it where when you use him to defeat a hero, you can then discard another ally aside from Pride at his location, provided that ally has at least one strength. Doing this allows Pride to remain in your territory, ready to be used again. This pairs incredibly well with Gluttony, who can then replay himself to Pride's location with his own ability. Of course, if Gluttony isn't around, Pride will make do by sacrificing whoever he has to. Wrath, meanwhile, is the epitome of a strong defense is a good offense. His ability allows you to move Wrath to the location of a hero whenever that hero is played to Father's territory. Thanks to this, if you have Wrath in play, any hero your opponent tries to play against you will be in danger as soon as they're played. Assuming you do choose to move Wrath after all, his ability is completely optional. That covers all 7 of the Homunculus, but we do have one last ally in Father's villain deck. There are 4 copies of a 0-cost ally called Mannequin Soldiers. The Mannequin Soldiers have 0 strength, but they get +1 strength if there's a transmutation token at their location. This makes them fairly useless allies overall, but they're there, so you may as well use them for something. Now that we know all of Father's allies, let's look back at Start a War. That 10 cost is going to make reaching your objective very difficult, but Father's allies can speed up the process. Let's look at some examples by placing several of Father's allies in his territory at various locations. It's important to understand that when playing Start a War, the cost reduction is dependent entirely on where your allies are. It does not matter where Father is when you play the card, just the location of his allies. So, let's say that you play Start a War to place a token at Lior, Father's second location. Currently, we have both Lust and Sloth at this location. Because Sloth has a strength of 3 while Lust has a strength of 2, this will make it where Father only has to pay 5 power to have Start a War place a token at this location. But say we wanted to place a token at Central City instead, where Father currently has Wrath, Pride, and Greed. These 3 allies add up to a total of 11 strength, meaning that the cost to play Start a War is subtracted by 11. A card can't cost negative power, so subtracting it by 11 in this case just means it costs 0 total power. If you try to play a Start a War for a location with no allies at it, such as Xerxes in this example, it's going to cost you the full 10 power. That's certainly an option that Father can take if he has the power for it, so while it's heavily recommended you use allies for your wars, it isn't strictly necessary. Now, we still have some other cards to get through in Father's villain deck, as you probably expected. The first one we're going to look at is one of Father's most powerful tools, an effect card called the Promised Day. The Promised Day is a card that when played has you reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal either an ally or an item. Once either card type is shown, you then get to play that card for free to anywhere in your territory. Any cards revealed by the Promised Day that aren't either an ally or item then get discarded after you've played the ally or item. However, thanks to Father's ability, you can instead pick and choose which revealed cards get put into your discard pile or shuffled back into your deck. You can also, of course, then choose to put the Promised Day into your discard pile or your deck via Father's ability. This is the best way for Father to get his powerful homunculus allies in his territory for a cheap cost of 1. However, there is always the possibility that the Promised Day will backfire and instead play one of the weak 0-cost Mannequin Soldiers. You'll probably want to either get your Mannequin Soldiers into your discard pile or play them into your territory so that this doesn't happen. The Promised Day doesn't just play allies, though. It can also potentially play the items in Father's deck, which we'll talk about now. Father has 3 items in his villain deck, which are the Philosopher's Stone, his old handy flask, and of course, Father's very own throne. The Philosopher's Stone is an item that gives both Father and all allies at its location +1 strength. This can give Father more strength to use in a clash, while also potentially making allies stronger so they can either defeat heroes or make Start a War cheaper. The Philosopher's Stone can even make those Mannequin Soldiers a bit more useful. Philosopher's Stone also has a secondary ability. If you're in Showdown, you can discard Philosopher's Stone from your territory to find and put the form card Divinity into your hand. You'll see why this can be so helpful when we get to Divinity later in the video. Father's next item is the Flask, which like all of Father's items is location dependent. If you end your turn at the same location as the Flask, you may draw until you have 6 cards in your hand rather than the usual 4 at the end of your turn. The caveat to this is that you then must discard 2 cards from your hand. Of course, with Father's ability, you could always just shuffle those cards back into your deck instead if needed. The final item is Father's Throne. If Father is at the throne's location, you may choose 1 card from your discard pile and shuffle it into your deck. There will be times caused by either the Fate deck or by changing Father's form that you end up with a card you want in the discard pile rather than back in Father's deck. Father's Throne is the solution to that issue, allowing you to get that card back into your deck with ease. We've got 6 more cards to cover for Father's villain deck. 2 effects, 2 schemes, and 2 forms. The last 2 effects in Father's deck are Human Energy and True Alchemy. Human Energy reveals the top card of your deck. After that, you gain power equal to that card's cost, up to 2 power at most, and then discard the card. True Alchemy, meanwhile, lets you perform one of either a discard cards action, a vanquish action, or a move item or ally action. This card pretty much means Father uses Alchemy to turn his play a card action into a different, equivalent one. It gives him a lot of versatility at his different locations as a result. The 2 schemes in Father's deck are Military Strategy and Equivalent Exchange. Military Strategy triggers when the targeted player gains 3 or more power and lets Father draw 2 cards, followed by discarding 2 cards. A good way, when paired with his ability, to better set up your next turn and what goes back into your deck. Equivalent Exchange is triggered when the targeted player discards an item or form from their hand or territory. Father may then choose either an item or form from his deck or discard pile and put it into his hand, shuffling his deck afterward. Lastly, we have Father's 2 forms, Shapeshifter and Divinity. Shapeshifter is a powerful form that has 2 abilities, although Father can only utilize one of them per turn. When you end your turn with Shapeshifter as your form, you can choose to either draw 1 additional card, meaning you'll have 5 cards in your hand, or you can move an ally to an adjacent location. This can help Father out in 2 different but very meaningful ways. With drawing additional cards, you can work your way through Father's villain deck much quicker, letting you find the cards you want and quickly discard the ones you don't. Be careful though, with Shapeshifter in play, you can no longer use Father's original ability to shuffle cards back into your deck instead of discarding them. Shapeshifter's second option is very good for when you have a lot of allies out and you're trying to use them to play Start a War. Once you put a transmutation token on the location with most of your allies, you'll want to move those allies to the next location to start a war there as well. Shapeshifter lets you move one of those allies at the end of each of your turns, quickly getting them from one location to the next. Shapeshifter also gives Father a strength of 3, which gives him the ability to clash with many of the heroes in his Fate deck, especially when paired with the Philosopher's Stone. Shapeshifter is discarded whenever a hero is played to anywhere in your territory. This means it can be very easy for your opponent to get rid of Shapeshifter, and also that there's almost nothing Father can do to get rid of Shapeshifter himself. Be sure you're prepared to lose your default ability and make use of Shapeshifters for however long your opponent decides to wait on hitting you with a hero. Finally, we have Divinity, a form that Father can only play if he's in Showdown. By completing his objective, Father attains godhood, and this form shows that off by giving him an incredible 5 strength. It also allows Father to discard a transmutation token from a location to defeat all heroes that are there, but only once per turn. Divinity is essentially Father's final trump card to win the game once he's achieved his objective. It makes it where he can easily defeat heroes by ditching transmutation tokens that he no longer needs, and also let him clash with any hero that's found in his Fate deck. A big reason why you'll likely want to discard Philosopher's Stone if you've played it for its ability to put Divinity in your hand. If you've entered Showdown and still have heroes to deal with, you'll want Divinity played as soon as possible. We're all finished with Father's villain deck. Now we've got a lot of heroes and a few other card types to look at in his Fate deck to be sure you're prepared for his opposition. Father has 10 heroes in his Fate deck. A lot of people really don't want this guy to succeed. The first 3 we'll look at are the members of the Elric family, Edward, Alphonse, and Hohenheim. Edward has 4 strength, and whoever plays him may choose an item from Father's Fate deck or Fate discard pile to attach to him, shuffling the Fate deck afterward. The only item in Father's Fate deck is Automail, which increases the cost of all villain cards by 1 power. This means Edward is going to cost Father more of his precious power and be difficult to defeat at the same time. While Edward interferes with Father's amount of power, his brother Alphonse tries to disrupt Father's attempts at stacking his deck with his villain ability. When Alphonse is played, the one playing him gets to reveal the top 8 cards of Father's deck, and then discard up to 3 allies that are revealed. This can get rid of the strong allies Father needs to start his wars, and also potentially force Father into reshuffling his deck if there are 8 cards or less in it. Do keep in mind that Father's ability will not allow him to reshuffle the allies that are discarded with Alphonse's ability. Father can only use his ability when he is the one discarding a card, and in this case, the person playing Alphonse is the one who's doing the discarding. The last member of the Elric family we have is Hohenheim. When Hohenheim is in play, all of Father's items have their abilities ignored. This can be rather frustrating for Father given how useful all 3 of his items are, and Hohenheim's 4 strength makes him annoying to defeat as well. Next up, we have 3 members of the Amestris military that oppose Father: Riza, Armstrong, and Mustang. Riza's ability makes it where all allies at her location get -1 strength. A good way to disrupt Father trying to play Start a War, and potentially preventing him from using his allies for a vanquish as well. Armstrong's ability makes use of his glorious muscles, giving him +2 strength provided there's an ally at his location. This puts him at 5 strength, the highest strength value that any hero in Father's Fate deck can reach, and stronger than any of Father's allies. Then we have Colonel Mustang, who much like his fellow military comrades has an ability relating to allies. Whenever Mustang is played, the one playing him can then discard an ally from Mustang's location. A very devastating blow given how much Father utilizes his allies. Remember that again, like Alphonse's ability, the one playing Mustang is the one who discards, so you cannot use Father's ability to shuffle in the ally Mustang torches to your deck. Our next 2 heroes are from the eastern nation of Xing, Ling Yao and Mei Chang. Ling Yao's ability prevents Father from moving allies from his location. This can be troublesome when you've already started a war at that location and want to move your allies on to the next location. Mei Chang's ability is a bit like a reverse version of Alphonse's. When she's played, the one playing her may choose up to 5 cards from Father's discard pile and shuffle them into his deck. Naturally, this means your opponent will likely be shuffling in a bunch of cards you already discarded and didn't want to see again, since you didn't use Father's ability on them. The last 2 heroes Father can encounter are Winry and Scar. When Winry is played, the one playing her gets to look at the top 3 cards of Father's Fate deck. That player can then discard any of them and return the rest to the top in any order. This can be used to set up some damaging fates in the near future, especially when you consider multi-fating. Scar, meanwhile, is perhaps the most troublesome hero for Father's objective. Transmutation tokens cannot be placed on Scar's location, no matter how many allies are present. This means Father will have no choice but to defeat Scar before he can place down a transmutation token at that location, which must be done for his objective. Assuming he hasn't already put one where Scar ends up, of course. While Father's Fate deck is mostly heroes, there is one item and one effect you'll see, with 2 copies of each. We already talked about Automail when mentioning Edward, but it isn't exclusive to him. If your opponent draws and plays Automail, they can attach it to any hero to increase the cost of all of Father's cards by 1 power. It's even possible for 2 Automails to be in play at the same time, so you'd better make sure to deal with any heroes that have Automail as soon as you can. The Fate effect found in Father's Fate deck is Umber Circle, which causes Father to lose all his power when it's played. This is one of the big reasons it's dangerous to just try and stockpile power as Father for your Start a Wars. You'll want to spend your power on allies to lower the cost of Start a War, otherwise if you try to save up to 10 power, you'll likely find an Umber Circle coming at you at the worst possible time. The final card we have to talk about is Father's Challenge, Gate of Truth. When Gate of Truth is in play, Father can neither clash nor make use of his villain ability. This is a major detriment to Father's progress, given how reliant he is on his ability, whether he's in Shapeshifter form or his normal form. To discard Gate of Truth, Father must pay 4 power and discard the top 4 cards of his deck. He can do this at any time, so luckily he's able to get rid of Gate of Truth as soon as it arrives, if he has the power for it. Still, the loss of power and discarding 4 potentially useful cards will cause Father some issues. We've now covered everything you'll need to know to play as Father. He's a dangerous, patient homunculus that will stop at nothing for his quest to attain godhood and truly surpass the humans he thinks so little of. Playing well as him will require a lot of careful planning and use of his many villain abilities, allies, and items. If you have any questions relating to Father, feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer you. Also check out the description for the playlist to see all the other Anime Villainous how-to videos if there's another character you want to learn about. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you again for more Anime Villainous videos in the future. Until then, farewell.